I've seen people calling the Aviktas Preview event a disaster, but I was there and I think it's a little more complicated than that. So let's discuss, shall we? Right, let's recap what this actually is then, because several months ago the park announced that they were doing a VIP preview event for the opening of the ride. Now, at the time when they announced this, no date had been announced, and it was a case of you can buy a ticket, we'll tell you the date in the future. If you can't make it, we'll happily refund it. And there was different ticket options. So as a season pass holder, it was £50 because I can then use the park thereafter. As a non-season pass holder, you had the choice of £50 getting you the flex ticket, so the non-rider option, where you could then pay per ride, or for £60, you would get the event and unlimited riding. Now, as a non-season pass holder, that's a bargain because it's normally 30 quid to get in the park, and arguably that extra tenner was what you were paying. Well, either you were paying a tenner to get around the park, or you only paid 30 quid for Aviktas, depending on how you looked at it. But the thing is, when it was first announced, I think, I'm trying to find evidence of this, but I believe when it was first announced, it was you will get one shot on the ride. And then when the email came out, it was telling us all the details and stuff, and it said, Aviktas is yours for an hour. So that obviously led a lot of us to think, well, great, we can lap this thing as many times as we possibly can in an hour. Well, that didn't happen. Anyway, let's get to how the actual day went then, shall we? So we turned up and we had to register, and we all got this kind of Aviktas lanyard with first rider on it, which is a nice little keepsake. So we were given those, and then we were told our ERT was at 12 o'clock, to be at the hub by 11:30, but recommended that we just go there straight away. Now, this park opened at 10, so that's an hour and a half before, 2 hours before the event, and an hour and a half before we're going to open the doors. So we did that. We went and we were quite close to the front of that queue. The queue extended right the way down the side of FY4, round past all the food outlets and over towards Impossible, because there was a lot of people there. We'll get to that shortly. That was all organised, and we were all kind of we're all British. We like to queue, so there was a nice organised line. Then they opened the gates at 11:30, and we went into the hub. Now, the hub was supposed to be our base during this event, where we could come back and talk, because as you'll find out, we weren't allowed to film in the area. So if we were doing any of that, we would have to come back to the hub and do so. But we got into the hub, and it was just, the open space that the hub is. So we went in and we started forming a line. But then we were told to use up all the space. So everybody started cramming in and filling out that space. And some of the people who were at the back of the queue, who had just joined it and not been in it for 90 minutes, ended up at the front of the queue. And some of us who had been there since the start were slightly further back. So I think that part was definitely not well organised. And I have fed that back to the park, because there is another event on Wednesday, which is when you're seeing this. So potentially they will make some changes. But it would have been good to see that queue that we'd all formed outside preserved when we came in, either with a cattle pen or just kind of cordoning off the side of the hub so that we all started to go in through the side. In any case, we were in there for, 30 minutes, something like that. The ride was testing, which was great to see. Then some staff testing on it. That's the thing, actually, they had done staff previews the couple of nights prior. I spoke to many staff who were on the ride. So we weren't the first riders, but we were amongst the first riders. And then the music started to play, got us all pumped up. Great soundtrack for the ride. Then the music stopped, and Andy Highgate gave us a little speech, getting the boring stuff out of the way, because one of the things that they made clear to us was, obviously we're allowed to film and photograph around the park, but as soon as we entered into that ride area, all cameras away, including, and they called them out, meta glasses. Now, I'm sit on the fence with these things. I will buy a pair when parks allow them. I don't see the point right now, because you're either breaking the rules or you can't use them. But anyway, they did all that, and they said, look, filming, if you want to film, you come back into the hub. Fine. I'm a little frustrated with this part. Not just as a content creator, because I'll be back in a couple of weeks. I've got an invite to go on opening day. But even if you were a member of the public who was there, you couldn't take a selfie of you with that ride to kind of remember the event. Now, at first I thought, they're not wanting us to film for one of two reasons. Either there's a surprise and they don't want people to see it, although we'd all talk about it, or it is incomplete. in which case they don't want pictures of a building site. As far as I can tell, neither of those two things happened. There was nothing in there that we didn't expect to see, and it looked pretty polished to me. Now, from speaking to the staff, there will be some tweaks before opening day, but they'll be small. There's probably things like the soundtrack, getting the audio timing and all that kind of stuff. I don't expect any significant changes, so I kind of don't get it, especially because there was a number of official images going around the day, 2 days before. I think they were leaked. I don't think they were intended to be released by the park. However, they were out there, so people had seen what the area looked like, the queue line, etc. I'm not entirely sure the benefit of this no filming. It probably would have done great promotion for the park to be like, hey, check out this new ride, it looks beautiful, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they said no filming, and in we went. Now, there was quite a few security there, and one of the things that ruffled a lot of feathers was that the security were getting a little bit bullish with people who had their phones out. I personally sit on the fence with this one because I'm on my phone all the time, right? I use my phone. I work with mobile phones for a living. I'm always on my phone, either replying to you guys on Facebook, on YouTube, etc. I'm playing games like Pokemon, or I'm always on my phone. But as a mark of respect, I kept my phone in my pocket for the whole experience. I thought, do you know what? Like, I want to absorb this experience and not be distracted by my phone. Some people were texting and they were told to put their phone away. I don't see a problem with that personally. I think some people got really upset with that and they were like, can't tell people you can't make a text. You basically said you're in a controlled area, put your devices away, and people ignored it. So I don't see a problem with that, but a lot of people got ruffled feathers with that one. We then get into the ride, and the area is beautiful, absolutely stunning. It's in keeping with a lot of Blackpool's recent theming. I think Sean described it as close to Boulevard the ride as you can possibly get in terms of colour schemes, and it's got a very similar water fountain at the entrance and stuff. But it's really, really well presented. They've done a great job. And then you get into the station and you load from two sides. The operations were really slow, and I also don't have a problem with that because the staff are still learning, right? By the time this opens, they'll have had a few more trial runs, and even on the 21st, I'm not expecting spectacular operations. Amazing if that happens, but I think we're going to have to give them quite a bit of time with the general public to get there. It seems like it was a combination of staff learning, but also the ride bedding in, because a few people had issues with the sensors, so it's very clever, because behind every seat there's a little light that goes on when the restraint is down far enough. One of the people that was there had their child and obviously smaller person, and the light didn't go on. It's like, well, okay, they're not large. It's not like it's not closed. So I think there's still a few teething problems with some sensors and stuff. This all resulted in very, very slow dispatches. Like, we're talking probably to the magnitude of 10 minutes per dispatch. I don't expect that to be the case when this ride is fully operational. I mean, if you look at the manufacturer's guide, it says it can accommodate up to 900 riders per hour, which is around about 2.5 to 3 minute dispatches. And I think the cycle is about 90 seconds. I think a minute's probably a bit tight to get people off and on because people fanny about with their bags and stuff. But in any case, I suspect we're going to get down to around about the 4-minute mark dispatches. Maybe 5 if people take forever getting their stuff. But it was slow, and again, frustrating, but yeah, they're learning, right? I mean, this isn't, it's almost like this is technical rehearsals. Paid technical rehearsals before anyone says it, I get it, yes. But it was technical rehearsals. The next thing, though, is that, as I say, some people were expecting to be able to get as many rides on this as they possibly could. And it transpired we were getting one ride. At least that was the plan. Those who were on the very first gondola managed to get back into the queue before they realised and closed the queue off. So there's a select few, potentially up to 40 people, who managed to get 2 rides on this. Everybody else got 1 shot. And I think they could have done this better in terms of batching, because part of the problem, I think, is that they oversold this. Maybe there was more demand than they expected. You'll find out in a minute. I think across the 2 days, there's 600 or up to 600 people. It possibly, and there was rumours that there was around about 300 to 400 people there just on the Sunday alone, which I think is probably about right. They could have batched that based on your registration, and you know, the first 100 people, it's like, right, you've got the ride 12 till 1, the next 100 you've got it 1 till 2, 2 till 3, and that would have spread the load out. Also would have given them longer to sort of test the ride and more time to train the staff. But you know, it is what it is. It was an hour. It took more than an hour to load everybody on. Yeah, there's a lot of frustrations in there. And the next thing is the keepsakes, right? So there was a lot of back and forward about that, because in some things it said plural keepsakes, in other it said singular keepsake. I mean, as I said, we got the lanyard, which, you know, says first rider. It's got Aviktas on the back. It's quite a nice little keepsake. I will be keeping that one. We also got a first rider certificate. Just, you know, expensive piece of card, as some people put it. Aviktas on the back, etc. And then we also got given this unique print, this limited edition print, and that's where I know, because it says on the back of this, out of 600. Now I am 551 out of 600. I don't think that was 600 on the that day. I think that's 600 across both days. But yeah, there's a unique little print there that we get to keep and put in a frame, for example. So I don't know what people were expecting in terms of keepsakes. Like, were they wanting some of those kind of plastic snakes? Were they wanting a pin badge? A pin badge might have been quite cool, to be honest. That would have been a nice little thing. But, you know, we got these keepsakes, and some people were frustrated at that as well. So I think from there's lots of ways of looking at this. For me, the ride is excellent. The ride is fantastic, and I haven't heard anybody say otherwise. Even those who were frustrated with the event all agree the ride hardware is fantastic. Intamin have done a great job. It is forceful, it is fast, it is smooth, it is free, because that lap bar you can move around. I know a lot of people that were there don't like spinning rides, but they tried it anyway, and trust me, it's more swinging than spinning. So if you are somebody who doesn't like spinning rides, you'll probably be okay. It's not money back guarantee. I described it as like a giant pirate boat that just happens to rotate. So the ride is brilliant, right? That aspect, fantastic. Organisation of the event, definitely some room for improvement. I know some people have said, well, I'll not be doing VIP events again. That was a disaster. I've done loads of events with Blackpool before. None of them have ever involved getting on a ride, though. So the behind the scenes, the fan club events, they go from very limited, where it's like 10 people on the event, and it's obviously a lot easier to manage, to the fan club events, where it's much larger, but you're not going on a ride. This is my first experience of a VIP event that involved getting on a ride, and there's definite room for improvement. And hopefully the park takes some feedback. I've certainly supplied mine to them, and hopefully they change it going forward. So I think that bit is frustrating. The next thing, I guess, is value for money, right? And that's going to vary from every single person that is watching this video, right? For me, the £50, you know, I think that was great value. I've done multiple events right the way up to £200-300 and beyond. I went in expecting one ride, and I thought, if I get more than that, that is fantastic. So one ride didn't bother me. The keepsakes, I don't know what to expect, but there's some nice things in there. To get in and see that, you know, somebody who is enthusiastic about the park, I want to see what it looked like behind the walls, get on that ride. So for me, the £50, I think, was value for money. Others will disagree with me, undoubtedly, because the value of money changes from person to person. So if you were there, I would really love to know your thoughts on this, whether you enjoyed the event, whether you thought it was a disaster, whether you thought the ride was any good. And if you weren't there, what are your thoughts? Has this made you think twice about doing VIP events with Blackpool in the future? And are you looking forward to that ride? If you've enjoyed this one and my croaky voice, make sure you hit that like button and do subscribe. I've been Chris, you've been watching Coaster Dad, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.